All right, so I think that I'm recording. We're taking a look at our semester review problems in college algebra. Here we have a word problem. Don't be afraid of the word problem. It's actually not that bad. We have a quadratic equation. I know it's quadratic because the largest exponent on my variable is squared. You're pretty familiar with quadratic equations. You know the graphs are parabolas. When the leading coefficient's negative, it's a parabola that opens downward. Well, that kind of makes sense here because we have Bob that is shooting an arrow from the top of a cliff. So here's the top of a cliff, and here's Bob that is shooting an arrow from the top of the cliff. So we know what goes up must comes down, and if we extend this arrow, the path of this arrow a little bit back, we can see that how it forms the shape of a parabola that opens downward. So that's kind of nice that we immediately see an application of our graph of a quadratic function. Let's look at it a little bit closer. The cliff has a height of 120 feet, and the function h is the height of the arrow, t is the time after you shoot it. Okay, so the arrow's distance above the ground can be modeled as a function of time in seconds. So after you shoot the arrow, you start a stopwatch, and as time passes, this arrow flies through the air and eventually starts to come down and hits the ground. So when will the arrow be 184 feet? Well, t is representing the length of time, and it's saying when, so it wants a value of t. How long will it take? How many seconds will it take for the arrow to be 184 feet in the air? H is the height. So in this equation, we want to replace the h with 184. We have 184 is equal to negative 16t squared plus 96t plus 120. So I suspect the 184 could be the vertex, and it could be the maximum height of the arrow, in which case we'll just get one answer for t, the length of time it takes to reach that maximum height. But what I think is probably more realistic is that at some time, I don't know, maybe 1 second or 2 seconds after you shoot the arrow is going to be a height of 184 feet above the ground. It's going to go up and reach its maximum height, and then on the way down, it's going to be another point in the path that's again exactly 184 feet above the ground. So with the quadratic equation, the exponent being 2, we're expecting 2 answers. I expect that this t, it'll be a time that's smaller than this t, and we can get this by using the quadratic formula, or maybe by factoring. Quadratic formula is probably going to be our best bet. So let's get this in standard form. Let's subtract 184 from each side. And let's take 120, well, if the calculator will turn on, 120 minus 184, so that's going to be a negative number, negative 64. Looks to me like all of these numbers are at least divisible by 4, maybe even divisible by 8. Let's check the 96. Is it divisible by 8? Yeah. Hey, maybe they're all divisible by 16. I can make these numbers smaller. Is 96 divisible by 16? Yeah, it sure is. So let's divide everybody by a negative 16 to just get that leading coefficient positive. If I divide by a negative 16 here, well, 0 divided, it's okay for 0 to be in the numerator. That fraction is going to reduce to 0. If I divide by negative 16, divide by negative 16, divide by negative 16, I'll get a quadratic equation that I guess I could have used the original values and let the calculator do the work with the quadratic formula, but when I see the numbers are going to get smaller, I hope that maybe I can factor it. On the left-hand side, I get 0. Negative 16 divided by negative 16 is just 1, and I get 1t squared. What did we say that 96 divided by 16 is 6, but only it'll be negative. Negative divided by negative is positive, and 64 divided by 16 is 4. So I don't see a way that I can factor that, but let's use the quadratic formula. We'll get two answers, maybe. I don't think that, since that's not a perfect square trinomial, yes, I will definitely get two answers. Using the quadratic formula, if I identify A, B, and C, the opposite of B, the opposite of negative 6 is positive 6, plus or minus B squared. Negative 6 times a negative 6 is 36, minus 4. A is 1, C is 4, and A at 2 times 1 is 2. So what do we have? We've got 6 plus or minus 36 minus 16, that's 20. And let's take a look at it. We know that 20 breaks down to 4 times 5, that I can take the square root of 4. I know the square root of 4 is 2, but I can't simplify. See, I can break the square root of 20 up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Alright, all this is being divided by 2. I've got 6 plus or minus 2 radical 5 divided by 2. I'm running out of room. All these are even numbers. In the numerator, if I factor out a 2, I'll have 3 plus or minus radical 5 all divided by 2. So that cancels. So I can jump to a calculator. I guess I could have jumped to a calculator earlier, but this will just be easier and I won't have to key in stuff. 3 minus the square root of 5 gives me, if I just round it to 2 decimals, 0.76. So in less than a second after you shoot the arrow, you started on a cliff that, gosh, I can't see that, that's so small. You were already pretty high up in the air. You were already at 120 feet, and in less than a second, you're all the way up to 184 feet. Now, if we change that subtraction to addition, 5.2. So let's say 5.24. So in 5.24 seconds, you've already gone up to the maximum height, and you're on your way down again, and you pass through a height of 184 feet again. So there's in the path of this arrow, there's 2 times at which you're exactly 184 feet above the ground, and one is really quick, less than a second after you shot the arrow, then it goes up to a maximum height, and on its way down again, it'll pass that 184 feet again. So the whole key to this problem then is substituting the left-hand side with the height, getting the equation in standard form, and solving it, whether you want to use completing the square or quadratic formula. And you don't necessarily have to reduce it like I did. You can jump to a calculator earlier in the problem, maybe right here, and you would still get these same decimal numbers. You just have more to key in. It's not very hard to key that in on the calculator. Hope that helps, and I'll talk to you later.